Today we'll be talking about one of my favorite bounty hunting ships in Star Wars, and that is the Houndstooth. Before we do though, I do just want to talk about bounty hunters in Star Wars generally. If you want to skip ahead to my ship discussion, I'll put a timestamp on screen. Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. Obviously, one of the most interesting moments in The Empire Strikes Back is the bounty hunter scene. On the Executor, we see Darth Vader, to the chagrin of the Imperial command staff on scene, communicating with bounty hunters who are being hired to search for Han Solo. And I mean, this scene is so interesting because it was basically George Lucas and ILM's opportunity to create 5 unique designs which didn't have to be tied to any existing aesthetic sense. It was essentially a brief look at the larger galaxy and a story which is ultimately up to that point fairly contained, and that's why I love it so much and why I think generally people have become so attached to these characters. On that note, I actually think it was a mistake to make the bounty hunters shown here be basically the bounty hunters across the entire galaxy. I think it removes some of the mystique of the Star Wars world building. It's a lot more interesting if Darth Vader just called whoever was in the neighborhood and he got this weird collection of characters. That's sort of generally a problem with Star Wars. Han Solo is the smuggler, Jabba is the gangster, these are the bounty hunters. But it's how it turned out, and I mean, George Lucas and shows like the Clone Wars had no small part in that. But as I mentioned, we are talking today about Houndstooth. That is the ship of BOSSK, not Houndstooth, the design on the shirt Ricky from Trailer Park Boys wears. No, Houndstooth is a 62 meter long modified YV-666 light freighter. In my mind, this is almost the perfect smuggler ship. It's also, for anyone who's played Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, an absolute bastard on defense. But I mean, I think people probably aren't properly conceptualizing just how large this ship is. The Millennium Falcon, for example, itself quite a large vehicle, is 34 meters long. This is almost twice that. It's comparable to a Boeing Dreamlifter. That's a really big aircraft. It's thus fairly remarkable that BOSSK is able to operate this entire ship all by himself. But unsurprisingly, according to the new Essential Guide to Vehicles and Vessels, it's really a phenomenal bounty hunting vessel. BOSSK is often the only living being on the ship, but he also has installed an X-10D droid brain. This allows him to not only control the ship from outside, allowing it to operate independently, but within the ship, he can call out and have the brain perform pretty much any function he wants. The Houndstooth is quite an interesting design. You may not be able to tell from its appearance, but this is in fact a Corellian Engineering Corporation ship. That meant, despite its somewhat blocky and honestly standardized looking outside appearance, it was heavily modifiable, with bounty hunters like BOSSK not only changing the internal weapons and engine systems, but also the configuration of rooms, which there were many of given this ship's vast space, including 3 decks with the bottom mostly being dedicated to ship systems. The wings on the back, by the way, those are maneuvering fins. Why a spaceship needs maneuvering fins, I'm not sure. However, they can be pulled up when the vessel is landing. According to the new Essential Guide to Vehicles and Vessels, BOSSK had his ship modified to contain the following: private quarters, a training room, an armory, an advanced medical bay, with the aft section being converted to a prison with several magnetically reinforced holding cells. These cages are connected to a force field generator activated by motion sensors in the event of a breakout, and it also has a skinning table, interrogation devices, and of course, knowing that BOSSK is a Trandoshan, his trophy collection. A lot of this sounds quite similar to the setup that Boba Fett had in Slave One during his bounty hunting days, just significantly larger, and that's one of the things I really like about Houndstooth. It would honestly be perfect even for a small outfit, almost like a smaller and probably more effective action transport. Also, like Slave One, BOSSK liked to keep his shit locked down. He could monitor everything going on from the cockpit and had a variety of advanced security systems, making intrusion or escape essentially impossible. When it comes to combat, obviously this thing was not moving like a starfighter, although there are 2 caveats for that. For one, the Houndstooth did actually have an onboard scout ship. It was called the Nashta Pup. It was a Z-95 Headhunter, and it was carried within the Houndstooth's cargo bay. Again, this is a very large ship. Personally, I would have upgraded to something maybe a bit more modern, but I like the idea of having the droid brain on ship and also the Nash to pup in case you want to go 2-on-1 with an enemy, although that would only be in pretty dire circumstances because it's almost certain that the Houndstooth is going to be significantly more durable than a Z95. As I mentioned, this is a large vessel, the entire lower decks are dedicated to ship systems. Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes has anything to go off of, the shield on this thing would have been quite impressive. I mentioned that the maneuverability probably wasn't great considering its size, but again, looking at the new Essential Guide to Vehicles and Vessels, it says, and I quote, "The Houndstooth's propulsion system is simple in design, but provides a great deal of maneuverability despite the starship's size. Thrust is generated by standard ion engines. Long maneuvering fins connected to the engine block allow vertical movement, while two main drive nozzles located between the fins control turning." Again, how the maneuvering fins really do anything in space, I don't know. This ship, at least in its current configuration, definitely wasn't the offensive juggernaut of other vessels, at least of its size, but it did have two retractable quad cannons, one which fired lasers, the other ion blasts. I actually like that, especially for a bounty hunter. It gives the ability to disable other ships. I always just feel like there's no possible way retractable weapons have the same sort of power as a full cannon. Like, I think of the Millennium Falcon's retractable turret versus its main quad laser cannon. Obviously, that is only a single turret, but I don't know. It's definitely something I could be wrong about. The guide does say that it can rip through most starfighters. Additionally, the Houndstooth did have a concussion missile launcher. It says that that was for fighting battleships, but if you're going to fight a battleship, you probably don't want to be in a relatively slow freighter. You want to be in something that's just specced out to the nines, like the Millennium Falcon. You want to be in another large capital ship, or you want to be in a small starfighter, which can avoid the laser cannons. The Houndstooth is like the last thing you'd want to use. The size isn't a benefit in this arena, although it is obviously for most other forms of bounty hunting. It definitely reminds me both in layout and sort of overall design of the Razor Crest, although again, that ship was significantly smaller. The Razor Crest comes in at under half the size of the Houndstooth. In Legends, the Houndstooth's most prominent appearance is probably in BOSSK's story within Tales of the Bounty Hunter. There, the ship is held up as fairly threatening. One interesting fact, though, is that BOSSK has a hard time with the ship, even with the XD-10 unit. Trandoshans have weird hands. The ships underwent modifications to fit him better, but it's still not great. Nonetheless, he is deeply, deeply attached and connected to the ship, which, I mean, makes sense given how Trandoshans are and how it's a tool of his hunt. On one occasion, after escaping the Sarlacc, Boba Fett actually stole the Houndstooth. It was also quite famously used by BOSSK to transport Wookiees from Kashyyyk into Imperial slave trade. And one detail I like is that it's just generally seen as being very stinky. But that's all I've got for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Until next time, let me know what you'd like to see me cover next, and I'll see you down below.